Hey, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and today we're going to be making this really simple card box using some very easy and cheap store-bought pine, and we are only going to be using the miter saw. No special clamps, no special glue, just a miter saw and some sandpaper, and you're going to be able to make this really clean, mitered memory box. Let's get started. So quickly, I just want to share my miter saw setup here. Now this is a 12-inch sliding miter saw. It has a little bit different of a design because instead of using rails, it uses this double hinge. This is a Bosch GCM 12SD. You might recognize this saw because I did this laser line modification a couple of years ago. What we're going to be doing with our saw today is we're going to be beveling it. Now, beveling a saw versus mitering. When you miter a saw, it's when you turn the head like this and it references against the fence. And when you bevel a saw, if you've ever seen a saw that touts its beveling ability, it's when you actually tilt the saw head completely. So we're going to be tilting the saw head in order to cut the miters on this wood. All right, so this is what we're going to be starting with. This is a piece of 1x10, which measures 9 1/4 common pine from Home Depot. This board, I don't remember exactly how much it cost. I want to say it was like 12 bucks, but it's not bad. I didn't pick a perfectly clear piece because I actually think the knots give it some character. So the purpose of this project is to show you how you can easily make a card box or a memory box, whatever you want to call it, using basically just the miter saw. We're going to use a sander along the way as well, but we're going to create a seamless, fastenerless box with basically just the miter saw. Now, depending on the size of the material you get, could vary the dimensions of the box that you make. Now I want this material to be able to create the lid of the box without having to glue it up, one solid piece for the lid. So because my material is about 9 1/4, the maximum depth that my box can be is 9 1/4. So that's going to be our target depth. Now I'm going to show you when I cut this, you can kind of go a little arbitrary on this, and we could use the miter saw to cut it down if we make the lid too big. So we're going to design the box around that 9 1/4 dimension. So we'll make it 9 1/4 deep. We'll make it 10 inches finished height, and we'll make it, let's call it 12 inches wide. So it'll be a nice size box, like a little kind of treasure chest type of thing. We're going to break this down on the miter saw, but one of the key things to think about is the miter saw needs to be able to bevel. So we're going to actually tip the head of the miter saw over. It doesn't need to bevel in both directions. I'll show you how you can cut these without beveling your saw in both directions. Let's go over to the miter saw and I'll show you how. All right, so I mentioned those dimensions before. That 9 1/2 is going to be the longest side, and we're going to go with a 12-inch front. Now, when you're cutting miters, the long point of those miters are going to dictate the exact size of the vessel that you're building. And when I talk about beveling on the miter saw, I'm talking about tipping the head like this. Now this is a 12-inch sliding miter saw, which can easily cut the width of this board on a bevel like that. If you have a smaller saw, you may have to use smaller material. But this 12-inch sliding saw will easily cut this. And this is a relatively expensive one, but Ryobi and a bunch of other brands make much less expensive 12-inch sliding miter saws. They're extremely versatile, and they're very useful to have if you don't already have one. The first cut that we're going to make is going to be a little bit wide. We'll do a 14-inch bevel cut this direction, which will give us one of our 12-inch pieces for the side. My saw has this LED light. I actually did that in a modification in a video I made a couple of years ago. But if your saw has a laser, that'll be helpful. If not, you're just going to want to pay attention to where your blade hits this. When you're cutting in on a bevel like this, you're going to be cutting in a miter in that direction, which means this is going to be the face of your material. So if one side of this material is nicer than the other side, you might want to have that side facing up. So we cut a 45-degree bevel on this piece of material, and we'll set this off to the side. I wrote 12 on it so I can keep track of them. Now, if you want, you can flip this board over and cut the next 12-inch piece based off of this edge. So if we come out and make a mark at 12 inches, we can just line up our saw with that mark. We don't need to readjust the bevel on this material at all. So our second 12-inch piece. Now we'll flip the material over again, and we'll cut our side pieces. The last piece to cut is actually to cut the second side of the first piece that we interacted with, which is this 12-inch one. We want a 12-inch piece. So let's flip this over. And a way that we can know where to cut this without doing any fancy measuring is by lining up the piece that we know is correct and getting in here and tracing a line where that bevel starts. So now we can use that as a mark for our saw to make these pieces the same size. Perfect. All right, so now we've got our 4 pieces for our box. So we want to kind of do a little dry fit, you know, just sort of see how things are looking. And whenever you're building a box like this, it's better for your miters to be a little open on the inside versus open on the outside, because open on the inside you can fill with glue. Open on the outside is a gap you're always going to see. Now, one of the things I'm going to use, just these really inexpensive and simple, these little clamps. These are from Rockler. And basically what they do is they're just sized for 3/4 inch material. And they basically just like grab on to your material, and they can help you get a good idea of your fit up. You know, I only have one set of 4, so I can't do all 4 corners on both sides, but I can get an idea of what the shape's going to look like using these things. They're pretty cheap, and they're definitely helpful if you're going to make, you know, boxes like this. Now, one of the things you might have to do is sort of look at the way these pieces line up if you flip them over or turn them around, because like this board, for instance, has a bit of a cup in it, and because of that, the boards fit differently depending on how I orient them. Actually, it looks pretty good. Gonna have to do a little bit of tuning to get our corners to line up, but that looks pretty nice. So once you get your box kind of set up, whether it be with this kind of clamps or just kind of like visually look at it and say, okay, these are the pieces and this is how I want to orient them, you're gonna want to label them. So I'll just do a 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, and 4. Now, to close up our corners, we're not going to use any fasteners. Like I said, I want this to be like super DIY. So what we're going to use is we're going to use some painter's tape, some super glue, and some wood glue. So we want to clean any of that fuzz off the corner there. We're going to take some painter's tape. We're going to put it on this edge. And now take your next board and line that seam up so that your top edges are perfect and it's nice and square. Now you can flip it back over and make sure that tape is really stuck on there. So we're going to use this thick CA glue along with some Type Bond 2 wood glue to glue this corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a couple of dabs of the thick glue, and then we're going to put wood glue in between those dabs. And basically what the thick glue is going to do is it's going to act as a clamp, and it's going to hold the box pretty well while this wood glue dries. And I'm using a thick glue because obviously with this angle, I don't want the glue to do too much running down the side. And also if there's a gap, I want it to be able to fill the gap for me. So So I'll put a liberal amount of wood glue in there. And then we're going to take some activator and we're going to spray the other side before we close it, which is going to help this glue set up really quickly. So we're going to hold that corner, give that CA glue, you know, about a minute to set up and really let it grab. But once you spray the activator on there, it pretty much grabs instantaneously. Like, it's already tight. I could probably yank it apart, but, you know, it's not going anywhere. While we have this open corner, we can clean up the inside, and then we'll work our way around the box. So the next corner we want to tape is this one so that we can lay the box down and glue this corner, and then fold the box around and glue the fourth corner. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did to the first corner, to these two, some thick CA glue, couple good dabs in there, some Type On 2, spray a little bit of the activator. The other thing we're going to need to do is actually glue the fourth corner now as well. So we'll get some wood glue on there, some activator up here, a little more down there. And then we're going to roll this whole thing around and close this vessel up. It's important to get this fourth corner nice and tight as you can. And let that glue set. So the super glue in there is acting as a clamp to hold all these corners together while that Type On glue dries. Now the dimensions on the box aren't going to change from this point, but you don't want to go too crazy messing around with it while you've just got the super glue sort of holding it together. You want to let that Type On glue set. This stuff is pretty quick. It's usually good in about 30 minutes to an hour if your shop is warm. Mine is not, but we're going to continue onward anyway. And we're going to cut the other pieces of the box while the glue sets up. We'll start with the bottom, which will actually help the strength of the box overall. Now we're going to inset the bottom into the box and we're going to glue it in, so we don't have to do any routing or anything like that. You're going to want to get really good measurements of what the bottom cavity of the box is. And in this case, it's 10.5 by 7 3/4. We're going to go back to our material on the miter saw and cut those pieces. Now you'll notice that my saw is still beveled over. When I'm cutting bevels, I like to leave my saw set up in that bevel position until I'm absolutely sure that I'm not going to be cutting any more, because if I need to cut another bevel, I want to make sure the angle matches with the other material that I cut. So here we're just going to cut this last angled section off. And now we can cut the 10.5 inch long piece. And now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Our next piece is 7 3/4. So 7 3/4 lands us there. Now if you have a sliding miter saw and a clamp, you can actually cut this piece on the miter saw. If you're nervous or you're not comfortable doing this on the miter saw, you could easily cut this with a handsaw. You know, really you're just basically ripping this. Now ripping something like this on the miter saw It can be a little dangerous, right? The material wants to spin out on you. But if you utilize your clamp that comes with most miter saws, which would go over here. Now, if we utilize that clamp, it'll just have a little extra protection to keep this board from spinning away from us. So you can see how easy that was. The board didn't move at all. And most miter saws will come with a clamp like this, or you can buy one. So now we've got the bottom of our box. Let's see if it fits. All right, I can already tell this is going to be a nice tight fit. It's just going to kind of make its way in there. I can see my box is a little bit out of square, so I might have to tune the cut just a little bit. But we're going to get that in there, and we're going to throw some glue on it so that once it's in there, it's kind of done. We don't need to mess with it again. All right, so we're going to throw some glue on this, and then we're going to just kind of tap it into place. So what you can do now, once you've kind of dropped that into place, if you want to secure it, if you still have your super glue handy, you can throw a couple of dabs of super glue and let it kind of sink in to those corners. Anywhere you can see a small gap, let it get in there, and then shoot it with some activator. It'll just help. Now we've got that. Now we've got the bottom in there, and that's drying. We can work on the top. So we want to double check our dimensions for the top, for the lid. Now in my case, I wind up with about 9 1/4, like we said. We're a little bit over 12. We're at about 12 1/8. That's fine. Now the top's just going to be a flat board, and we can cut that over on the miter saw now. All right, so we've got our lid piece on there. My fit up isn't super great. It's passable for this for these purposes, but essentially this is your lid. Now, if you wanted to, you could recess around this lid so that the lid registered up against the inside of the box. You could do that with a router or even with a hand chisel if you wanted to, but for this, we're just gonna basically allow this lid to be attached, and then we're going to sand the box. Now at this point, I've given the glue some time to dry, and we can go ahead and peel this tape off and see what our corners look like. Now, considering we cut our bevels on the miter saw, they actually turned out pretty good. They're pretty tight. If your bevels are open, what you can do is you can take something like the handle of a hammer, and you can actually roll them over a little bit, sort of burnish them. And what that'll do is it'll just sort of roll the edge of the wood over and just give you a little bit of closure to close up those gaps if you wind up with a small gap. I mean, we are going to sand this box, but I mean, that corner looks pretty good. All right, once this has had some time to dry, we're going to go ahead and sand it. Now, this is just a cordless 5-inch sander. You could use any sander. If you don't have a powered sander, you can make a little hand sanding pad and sand it that way. These can be bought for as little as like 40 or 50 bucks. Normally, I would hook mine up to a vacuum for dust collection, but you don't need that either. These little bags do a pretty good job. Here's a little tip when you're sanding. If you've got one of these, this is just like a shelf liner. Get them from the supermarket or the dollar store. It'll help your parts not move around while you're sanding them. Now, I was just sanding with 150 grit. We'll go up to 220 grit. All right, so now we're gonna get some finish on this. So what I've got here is some Minwax Dark Walnut. Now, if you've ever used this before, it's dark. I mean, it like really, really gets the wood a super dark color, and I think it's too much. So what I like to do when I use a stain like this is actually don't mix it. Let it sit and let that heavy pigment sit at the bottom of the can. I just did a test with this, and that's what you'll get in this white pine, which is a really nice kind of distressed brown look, which I think will be really nice versus a really dark wood. This was a different color I tried, but I really like the way the dark walnut looks. Again, when it's not mixed. This is just a shop rag. I'm gonna make like kind of a pad out of it, fold it over a couple of times, and we're gonna apply it all over the box. It's a beautiful color that still allows a lot of the grain and the features of the wood to come out without muting them. A lot of stains are too much and they mute all the features of the wood. We're going to be pushing with the grain when we're staining. So while I'm staining the bottom, I want to show you something really important. So see these weird spots? This is all the places where I still have glue on the material. So that's something really important to know when you're staining, is that if you leave any wood glue or super glue anywhere, the stain's not going to soak in there. So I specifically stained the bottom so you could see that, because I didn't clean it very well. But the faces look beautiful. We're also going to stain the inside. The last thing to stain is going to be the lid. Something important to note, this rag is soaked with stain. Do not take this rag and crumple it up and throw it in the garbage. You have to let this air dry. Otherwise, these actually can spontaneously combust in your garbage pail. So I usually will hang them over the rim of my shop sink or over the rim of the garbage pail and let them sit overnight, or I'll put them outside and hang them over like the railing outside my shop. Never ever crumple these up and throw them in a garbage pail. Many shops have burned down from rags like this in a black garbage bag overnight. So now that I've got this thing coated in stain, I'm going to give it some time to dry. I'm not going to put a second coat of stain on it because I want to keep it this color. Right now, to the naked eye and to maybe an unexperienced woodworker, it actually looks like walnut. I think that, considering it was cheap white pine, this stain, and like I said, the key here is not to mix it, does look really nice. And the box looks beautiful. So we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to put the hardware on. So I gave this some time to dry. It's pretty cold in here. It's in the 40s, which is not ideal for stain at all. So if you're going to stain something like this, bring it inside, let it get warm, let that stain really dry. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to give it a light sanding with some 320 sandpaper. And then we're going to put our final finish on it, which is going to be paste wax. So we did a quick little sanding with some 320. And now we're going to use our final finish on here, which is just going to be some natural paste wax. So I'm going to be using this hardware that I got on Amazon. It's these little hinges with some screws and these small latches. I bought these in a kit on Amazon. It was pretty cheap. I'll throw a link to it. It's just basically a little hook latch and two little hinges. These are in kind of like an antique brass, and they come with hardware, which is really nice. So we're going to put these hinges on, and what we're going to do is we're just going to take an awl and just mark the position. A little bit of blue tape will just keep the lid closed while we set up the latch. And with these tiny little screws, that little pointy awl can actually act as a really good kind of starter, so you don't have to pre-drill holes with these. All right, so we're pretty much done. I'm fighting kind of a bad fit up here. Basically, my lid is a little too short in this direction for my box, but I think the concept is all there. So like I said, it's pretty cold in my shop, and my stain definitely could have used a little bit more time to dry. But really, the purpose of this video was to show you how with just one piece of 8-foot lumber, and I probably have about 2 feet left, so you probably could get away with a 6-foot piece, you can make a really nice finished looking box to, like I said, store cards in, sort of just put things in. And with a little bit of work on your miter saw, basically some blue tape and some glue, you've got this pretty nice finished product. These things make a great gift if you've got an event or anything, and you want to make a memory of it. You can have people put their cards or gifts in a box like this, sort of at your party. I know people will make these for weddings and they'll personalize them. You could easily, you know, paint or draw on this. And like I said, really, really easy, and you made it yourself. All right, that about does it for this video. Again, this was a real simple project because, you know, here on my channel, I want to show complicated things and specialized things, but I also want to show that you don't need a ton of specialty tools to make nice looking things, you know, either for yourself or for somebody else. This kind of spawned from a friend of mine who came to the shop and said that she wanted a card box. So I made one for her out of the material I had here. And when I was done, she said, well, that was pretty easy. I feel like I could do that. And I thought, why not make a video showing the process? So obviously the key component here was a sliding miter saw, a sliding saw. This is a 12-inch blade saw, is gonna make this a lot easier, and it's gonna make you able to use larger material. But if you don't have a sliding 12-inch saw, some of the smaller saws still have a really good capacity and, you know, don't feel limited by not having the tools. Again, we didn't use any fasteners on this. The only screws we used were for those hinges and for the latch, and I'll put a link to where you can get those down in the description. I bought this wood from Home Depot. Like I said, it was about $15, and the stain is also from Home Depot as well, which I think looks really nice. You know, you could take this concept a lot further. You could do a lot more things with this. You could really jazz this thing up, you know, glue up the top, use different woods and all those different things. And I encourage you to do that. If you want to see what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis here in the shop, follow me right here at Make Everything Shop. I post pretty much every day. I posted about this while I was working on it, and I put a little Q&A up there. I also just like to answer questions and show people what I'm up to. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you have tips on how to make something like this, leave them there. You know, there's a lot of dialogue that goes on in the comments of my videos, and I always encourage that, and I always encourage people to ask me questions. If I can help, I'm more than happy to. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this and more videos of me working here in the shop. Again, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks.